The Premier League season has now come to an end, and we now know who will be competing in the Premier League next season and in the EFL Championship. In today's video, we ask if there is a curse associated with Premier League relegation, looking at the financial impact and the associated relegated, promoted and potentially thereafter relegated status of clubs. Once clubs are promoted, unfortunately, the odds are stacked against them, whether they've had Premier League status or not in the past. The vast majority of relegated clubs come from the population of those that have been promoted. So although there is a significant instant financial impact to being relegated from the Premier League, there's also that battle to get back into the most prestigious league in the world and then to remain in that league. In today's video, we're going to look at the financial impact of relegation and some statistical analysis around those positions. My name's Neil Wood and I'm a football finance professional. On this channel, we teach you about finance through the medium of football. So if you like that topic or if you like the video, please hit like, comment, subscribe, follow us for more and share the video with your friends. Following on from Sunday's fixtures, we now know that Everton survived the drop. But unfortunately, Leeds, Leicester and Southampton will be relegated. Of that population of 4 clubs, Everton is a founding member of the Premier League and has held onto the Premier League status since 1992-93, the first season of the Premier League. The results of the weekend maintain that there are only 6 founding members of the Premier League that remain, being Everton, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Tottenham Hotspur and Liverpool. Brighton and Brentford are the 2 non-founding members of the Premier League that are bucking the trend of the promoted clubs having not been relegated so far. And the trend of promoted clubs being relegated from the Premier League is something that we'll discuss later in the video. Manchester City is the only founding member to have previously been relegated and then gone on to be promoted and win the league. And unfortunately for Leicester City, they are the only non-founding member to have been promoted to the Premier League, having won it and then subsequently been relegated from the Premier League. A status that I'm sure they really did not want. That means that in 30 years of the Premier League, only 2 clubs have ever been promoted to the Premier League and won it. And one of those is Manchester City, arguably one of the best teams of all time. But that's up for debate. What do you think about that? Leave your comments below. Statistically, once relegated and then subsequently being promoted, the odds are stacked against you when it comes to that relegation battle. If we look at a historical period from 2012-13 all the way through to 2022, we can assess the likelihood of a promoted club being relegated from the Premier League. During that time frame, the cumulative proportion of the clubs that have been promoted being subsequently relegated increases from 47% from year 1 of promotion all the way through to year 10 following promotion, where the likelihood of relegation based on that historical period increases to 93%. Since 2012-13, only 2 clubs have been relegated that have lasted longer than 10 years in the Premier League. One being Fulham and the other being Aston Villa. Fulham were relegated in 2013-14, having been promoted at the turn of the new millennium. Aston Villa were a founding member of the Premier League, so they've been there since 92-93 and were relegated in 2015-16. The remaining population of 28 clubs that were relegated over that 10-year period all spent fewer than 10 years in the Premier League. Of the 20 clubs that have been promoted since 2012-13 that have been relegated thereafter, the clubs have lasted a maximum of 6 years in the league, with the exception of Leicester, who lasted 9. And it's extremely unusual that at least one of the 3 relegated clubs is not a newly promoted club into the league. Over the time frame that we're talking about, since 2012, that's only ever happened once before until now. Southampton have spent 11 years in the league, Leicester 9 and Leeds 3. So the newly promoted clubs have all survived. Over this period, Crystal Palace are the longest serving Premier League club, who were promoted in 2012-13. But based on these statistics, we're saying at this point, it's almost inevitable that they'll be relegated. But it's just a case of when. Over the period of time that we're looking at since 2012-13, there were 30 relegation spots available, and 29 of those spots have been taken by promoted clubs. The outlier being Aston Villa, who were a founding member of the Premier League that were relegated in 2015-16. Now, it's not that football started in 1992 when the Premier League was formed, but that's when we see the start of this new era. It was a fundamental shift in English football, and now we're seeing the domination of the Premier League across the whole of Europe, if not the world. The global brand is extremely valuable, and that's why we're looking at this from a Premier League perspective. So if we look at this from a promoted club's perspective, Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United have been promoted this season, and Luton are the only team to have not experienced Premier League football in the past. Now it looks bleak for them statistically. However, the recent trend this season is that newly promoted clubs missed a drop, so they'll be hoping for a repeat of that next season. From Luton's perspective, they'll need to invest. They'll need to invest in Kenilworth Road, and they're likely to need to invest in the squad in order to be able to compete in the Premier League. There's also the potential new stadium at Power Court, which will be a substantial investment, way in excess of the £10 million that's needed to improve Kenilworth Road to Premier League standards. The good news is that Luton can spend this money and it will not hit the FFP calculation. Not that that should be a problem for now, because they'll be moving from a relatively restrictive environment in the EFL Championship to a more relaxed environment in the Premier League when it comes to the allowable losses. Both the EFL and the Premier League encourage infrastructure spend, so any spend on the stadium, on the academy, or any physical buildings will be relievable when it comes to the depreciation cost or the cost of construction for that facility. The big question for Luton, and the same for Burnley and for Sheffield United, although they've experienced it in the past, is how much to invest in the squad over summer. And history says that the more that is spent in a smart manner on the squad, looking at the existing squad to begin with, then this is something that will keep you in the Premier League, or at least it's more likely to. Look at Nottingham Forest, for example. They spent in excess of £200 million last season, and they have survived. Some may see this as a gamble, but it will be up to the owners of Luton to try to gamble on that Premier League status, or whether they'll be happy with just one season at the top of the tree. From Sheffield United's and Burnley's point of view, they've been there and done it in the past. So they've got the experience of transitioning between the leagues. So they should be well versed in being able to understand what's needed. But what about the cost of relegation? Let's take some time to assess this. The first point is around lost revenue. The Premier League being the most lucrative league in the world, and one that has the most fair distribution of its wealth. The Premier League's broadcasting deal is split and distributed into various sections. The UK deal is split into the basic award, which is split equally, facility fees and merit payments. Facility fees being the payments made to clubs for live or near live or highlight games. Therefore, the more that your team plays on live TV, the more money it will receive. Merit payments are approximately £1.7 million per place. So Southampton, who finished in 20th place this season, would have received £1.7 million of merit payments. The split between the basic award, facility fee and merit payments is 50, 25, 25. So 50% to the basic award, 25% to facility fees, and 25% to the merit-based payments. The international broadcasting rights are split on an equal basis up to a specific amount which is set by the league each season. Amounts after that will be split on a merit basis until a specific ratio is hit, whereby the mechanism reverts back to an equal distribution to maintain a ratio of 1.8 to 1 from top to bottom of the league. And this is a critical part of the Premier League structure to maintain competitive balance. Commercial contracts, or Premier League sponsors as they're known, are split equally between all Premier League members. So what do relegated clubs receive? Well, they receive something called parachute payments. And the parachute payments are calculated based on what's being equally distributed, which includes the UK and the international broadcasting rights. They do not include any merit-based payments, commercial contracts, or facility fees. Based on what we now know at the end of the 22-23 season, there will be 22.75 shares, or the equivalent of 22.75 shares, split across 26 members, being 20 Premier League clubs and 6 relegated clubs. That means that the equal share monies will be distributed across all 20 members of the Premier League, with the newly relegated clubs being Leicester, Leeds and Southampton each receiving 55%, Watford and Norwich receiving 45%, having previously been relegated and in the second year thereafter, and West Brom, having been relegated 2 years prior, in their third season in the Championship would receive 20%. Adding the shares of those 6 clubs up comes to 2.75 full shares. Assuming the newly relegated clubs do not get promoted, they would receive 45% in the next season and 20% in the season thereafter. If any relegated clubs only had 1 season in the Premier League, they would only be eligible for the first 2 parachute payments, being the 55% and the 45% payments. But how does this equate to lost revenue? Based on the 22-23 figures, the relegated clubs will lose out on approximately £60 million or just slightly more depending on where they've finished in the league, with Southampton losing out on just less than £60 million. And that's when parachute payments have been taken into account. The lost revenues as a pure Premier League club that are guaranteed would be £105 million, but the parachute payments offset that by £45 million. A club with Premier League status isn't just entitled to the equal distribution. They're also entitled to at least 10 live games and the merit-based payments and the commercial contracts. And those amounts will just disappear overnight. And it's just the equal share amounts of which the clubs would get a proportion. The newly relegated clubs would receive 55% of that equal distribution. That's just broadcasting revenue, which is going to see a substantial reduction. Obviously, there will be some offset from what's going to be generated from the Championship's broadcasting deal in the EFL, but that will largely be determined based on the finishing position of the team next season, so quite hard to quantify. But other revenue streams may be dented as well. Primarily, commercial income and matchday could see a hit. Matchday being made up of hospitality and general admission, where in the Championship you will not be able to charge as much as what you would do in the Premier League. You're swapping some big hitting clubs such as Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, etc. for ones that will be competing in the Championship. Existing commercial partners that are sponsoring the club may have relegation clauses within those contracts, or they may well be able to just walk away. And it will be more difficult for the club to attract new sponsors in the Championship, simply because the exposure is lower than that of the Premier League. Given the financial disparity between the Premier League and the Championship, the parachute payments are sometimes described as trampoline payments because they give such a substantial advantage to those clubs in receipt of them versus those clubs who aren't in receipt of them. And that means that the chances of those clubs returning to the Premier League is high in comparison to those that don't receive them. Luton are one that are bucking that trend, and they're very much the fairy tale story of the Premier League promoted group. Luton have never been in the Premier League before. They have been in the old Division 1, but they've also been down to the National League, or what was then known as the Conference, in 2009, and have subsequently returned to the English Football League, and from next season will compete at the top of the tree in the Premier League. It's quite a remarkable feat, and one that proves that potentially it's not all about the finances. And for any neutral that's watching the Premier League next season, I'm sure they'll be fighting for the underdog. But what will the club do to offset that revenue reduction? The first thing is to potentially cut the wages of the players. And any sensible club that may risk relegation or think that they're in that relegation zone should be inserting relegation clauses within their contracts. Some players may want to walk away because they believe that they're Premier League players, and some will remain, but potentially having taken a substantial wage reduction. And that can cause some problems, especially if it's not all players that are being asked to take a reduction. It can cause problems in the dressing room, but it can also cause problems with the financial health of the players. And yes, you might not feel sorry for them having gone from £50,000 a week to £25,000 a week, but if they're living a lifestyle of someone that's earning £50,000 a week, it's very difficult to rein that back in. When it comes to off-pitch costs, some staff that do not form part of the playing squad may be asked to leave. Cash flow and liquidity management will be vital to all clubs that are being relegated in a period where cash inflows are being reduced. Any financial institutions that are involved in the club may look to recall debt or even ask for it to be refinanced, because the risk of a football club which is already relatively high increases once that Premier League status has gone. The management staff that are involved in recruiting and selling players are going to have a further headache. It's very clear when a club is trying to sell a player, when that club has just been relegated, that a deal is to be done. Equally, on the recruitment side, recruiting players having just been relegated from the Premier League is going to be difficult, especially if you're looking to try to get back into the Premier League and attract players of a Premier League quality on a Championship salary. So statistically, it looks as though Everton have missed that relegation curse and maintain their Premier League status at least for one more year. But the promoted clubs do look like they've got a job on their hands to maintain their newly gained status of Premier League clubs. Is this a curse of relegation? Is it about the finances, or is it all just a coincidence? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like, subscribe for more football finance related content. My name's Neil Wood and I'm a football finance professional. Thanks for watching.